Welcome everyone to another Thriving Thursday workshop with Ascending Tribe. This week we have the beautiful Regan Keely here, who will be taking us through creating your own reality, the tools needed to kind of reverse the programming and the conditioning to kind of move forward. Regan is a true seeker. She's a spiritual guide and she is also a Reiki healer. So Regan, would you like to give us a little background and then take it away?
Yes, thank you so much for having me here. It really is such an honor, and I'm so excited. So, really, a lot of what I've learned about creating your reality came from healing, because I've been practicing healing and energetic healing and Reiki for years now, and just always having this knowing that the body was able to heal itself so much more than we were told. And eventually, that turned into not just the ability to heal ourselves, but the deeper abilities to, create our reality and even perceive things outside of, um, things we've been told. Uh, More like subtle vibrations, more kind of psychic abilities. So I've been really passionate, interested in that, and studying a lot, reading a lot about that, and more than anything, experimenting, because I think that's the best thing. Even with this information I'm going to share with you today, I hope it's helpful, but the best thing to do is to practice, because even just knowing it is half the battle. But it's when you really start to practice the stuff and experiment with it on your own, in your own life, that you really begin to grok how this works and all these amazing abilities and talents we have and we're stepping into that many still don't even believe we have. So that's why I'm so passionate about this. I truly believe that this is life changing and life saving information, and healing your body, healing your mind, healing your emotional self. And not only that, but truly creating the life you want to experience. And it really starts from the inside out. So I want to talk about, I guess, a really simple formula I've come up with, just 4 steps, just to make it simple, because it is a simple process. We are creator beings naturally. We just tend to forget. So, you know, it's something you don't really want to overthink, because it really is so simple and so natural. And more than anything, it's a matter of us getting out of our own way and allowing for this to come through, more than trying to attain something. And along the way and towards the end, I really want to give some tips and techniques and tools that I've learned that have benefited me greatly. So a lot of it too is about, we're in such an amazing time right now where it's getting more and more conducive for you to consciously create your reality from the inside out than it's ever been. So even if you've studied or practiced a law of attraction before, I find every single day now it's really becoming more and more conducive for us to set our intentions, and the universe really just kind of flows with us and helps us the more that we can believe that and again allow that. Because, and I think this is a big part of humanity, the collective of humanity shifting consciousness, there's so much more awareness. So before, and this is true individually and collectively because it's a fractal. When you're unconscious, you're a victim to your environment more. But the more you make the unconscious conscious, the more you can actually have a lot of creative awareness and control. And even more, as you begin to master these aspects of yourself, you can literally work outside of time. And I really want to get into that because it's so exciting. I know I find this information to be so liberating and so empowering. And I think that's what we really need right now. And before I get into it, I think another thing that is also really important, even if you've been practicing this for a long time, I always have to remind myself again and again, and I think this is part of the conscious evolution, is letting go of control. Even though you have creativity, you are a creator being and you can create and attract the experiences you want very masterfully, especially the more you practice this. It's always helpful to remember to have fun, and because it's the ego, and a lot of times the ego acts in fear, out of lack, out of attachment, out of clinging, and the ego wants to control everything physically, when really it's the higher self that knows what you really want and knows what's best for you. And the more that you can kind of allow that and work with that, invisible force. Again, I think this is part of our evolution right now, because we're so used to living in our ego. We're so used to trying to force everything physically. We're so used to having control and wanting to control everything, that it can be a little bit unknown to just kind of let go and trust that your higher self knows what's best for you. Because every time I've ever been able to let go, I'm always amazed at, you know, how things that I wanted manifest in a way that's even better than I could have imagined, once I let go, of those attachments. So, all that being said, I want to get into the formula, because I think this is really amazing. It's kind of like that saying, if you teach, or if you give a man a fish, you feed him for a day. If you teach him to fish, you feed him for his whole life. It's the same thing with this information. It's like, I can give someone money, I can give someone a healing, I can give someone this or that, and that's awesome. But if you can truly give someone this knowledge, and they're ready for it, then you can help that person to empower themselves to create the reality they really want on all aspects, because that's part of this programming. And so much of this, the reason it's so important isn't just for you to create the life you want, which you are capable and deserving of, we all are, but it's a way of actively breaking this programming. And it's actually a way of healing and aligning with God and universe as well, in your creativity, because we're so um, programmed with these self-sabotaging beliefs that we've been told are normal. And they have been normal because we've all been doing it. But again, now that we're making the unconscious conscious, we're realizing we have so much more creativity and freedom and sovereignty in how we choose this. And we really can create from the inside out. So instead of having to force everything physically, and this idea of everything has to be hard, having to struggle, having to climb your way to the top, and all these kinds of old things, the more you understand this knowledge, the more you realize it's more about energetic alignment. And that's where the real work is. And that can be even more challenging sometimes, but the empowering part is it's something that we all can do. It doesn't matter who you are, where you're coming from, or what you have. Everyone has, as long as you have a conscious awareness, you can begin to do this. And again, now that the way the energy is changing, it really is accelerating our processes. So we really are blessed with that. So really the main 4 steps that, at least right now, that I've broken it down to when it comes to creating an experience that you want to experience is 4 steps. 1, being present, and I'm going to break this down more in a second. 2, creating it in your mind, thinking it, and that's the electrical component of it. 3, feeling it in your heart, and that's more the magnetic component. And 4, letting go. Trusting, allowing, and I almost feel these are all important steps, but I sometimes feel this is the most important because, again, as I was saying before, we are so programmed to want to cling to things and attach to things, or the things we really want, we'll put it on a pedestal, and that can actually bring us way more suffering than if we just let go and trust and have faith. And faith has been mocked so much, when really faith is a superpower, because faith can be very hard to have, especially when we are in this linear time and we want to identify with this past and with the ego and with the trauma that really can anchor us down. So again, this is very simple. This is designed to be natural to us. We are creator beings. Things are meant to work in our favor. Again, the reason we've been so sabotaging ourselves is because of the inversion of the mind control. And, it's not anyone's fault. We were just inundated with it as children, inundated with these inversions of reality. And at the core of that is just this idea that you create from the outside in instead of you create from the inside out. And what's funny about your beliefs is, if you truly believe, even if it's unconsciously, you create from the outside in, then it will be true for you. And then you will continue to be a victim to your environment. And that makes you very weak and very controllable. And again, not trying to stay out of duality here, no right or wrong, but that's just how it is. And you can see, in the state of the world. That's why through generations, humanity has been subverted into these paradigms of giving their power, giving all of their creative power over to these authorities that are going to tell you who you are, what you can do, what you're capable of, how to heal yourself, what's good, what's bad, and all of these things. We start to find that the more you come back into self, the more you truly have the creative power over your reality from the inside out. And that's very liberating. It's very liberating to do that. So going deeper into it, and another thing, just in case it isn't clear, it is your beliefs and your programming and your thoughts and your emotions that make up your reality, that make up your resonance. That's why making the unconscious conscious is such an amazing tool in being able to create the experience you want.
Can I ask a random question, please?
Yeah.
So say you've shared a belief with someone, and obviously you truly believe it because you want to manifest it. What if someone's like, nah, it's not going to happen for you? Does that go against your, if you know what I mean?
Yeah. So really with that, from my understanding, it's like, if you believe them, if you take that to heart, then it will affect that manifestation for you. And that's, and that's funny that you say that, because I was actually going to say that before, is like, that's why in a way those boundaries are so important. And sometimes it's good not to, obviously it's up to you if you want to share it with someone or not, but with any kind of creative work, it's like you have to kind of have those boundaries and learn to I don't know, not take those external judgments to heart, and if they come up, then maybe that's just an aspect of yourself, that's like an aspect of contrast where you're able to, maybe that wasn't a doubt you had that now you can work out. And I'm going to talk about contrast more as we get into it. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that's cool. I was thinking I still believe what I believe, and someone was like, nah, it's not gonna happen, but I'm like, I still believe it. So as long as that negative energy won't impact me.
Yeah, and it comes down to your choice. Once it's your choice if you want, if you're gonna take that to heart, or if you're gonna be like, no, I'm sovereign. I create my reality.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you.
You're welcome. So going back and kind of talking more about these steps in the formula is step 1, present moment. So this one, it's so easy for us to want to go into the past or go into the future, and another tricky thing that often happens is we identify with past versions of ourselves, which can keep us really, really anchored into, I've never been able to do this. I've always had this problem every time I do this. And that's where all that trauma is. So being able to be in the present moment, and of course, every spiritual teacher talks about the present moment, but again and again, you will come to find that that is where all the magic is. So the more you're resisting the present moment, the more you're kind of resisting even the things you're trying to create, because your now moment, we are multidimensional beings, and we're really coming into awareness of this, which means we're being conscious in multiple dimensions at once, in multiple realities at once. And these are just words, but in the present moment, that's where you have all your power. That's where you have access to literally every potential timeline that you can think of. And only in the present moment can you really do this alchemy. And I want to talk about this more in a minute, because I think that this tip of emotional alchemy has been so helpful to me in general, especially when trying to create. But so coming back to the present moment and being able to kind of be in a surrendered state of allowance, of letting go. And speaking of the emotional alchemy, it's like when you've come back to the present moment and you start, if you start to notice you have any kind of lower vibrational emotions, maybe like anger or doubt or fear, and these are things we all feel. We have a tendency, and we've been really programmed to try to repress these and ignore them and avoid them, when really that causes a lot more suffering than if we would just feel it. So it's been really helpful for me every time I feel like an emotion like that come up, to come back into the present instead of trying to avoid it or create a storyline around it, because the mind wants to try to start creating narratives and looping, when really if you just observe the emotion, even if it's really deep, and just feel it completely. And sometimes it takes a few minutes, sometimes it takes 20 minutes. It depends on, what it is and how deep it is. But when you just give yourself the chance to feel it with no resistance and just go head into it, you'll notice, and this is how the body is designed, that it'll be intense. You might have to cry, you might have to, just let it out, but you'll notice that it'll move through your body and it'll move right out. Versus if you try to resist it and keep it in the fog and hide it from yourself, you're going to be carrying it around with you way, way, way longer than you need to. So I think that's a really helpful hack to start doing. That changed my life a lot when I stopped carrying that around and I just breathe it in and breathe it out. Those emotions are designed to come right in and out of you. When we cling to them, when we attach to them, when we let our thoughts, those voices in your head, start adding these storylines and narratives, and just, that's when you start looping, and that's when that can really prolong. So when you can just be in the heart and transmute that, it's a very helpful tip. So going back to the step one, so being in the present moment, sometimes you have to do that to really begin to just surrender and allow yourself to just be in that presence where all your creation of power is going to be, no matter if you're trying to heal, no matter if you're trying to create, no matter if you're trying to travel. So step two would be, again, thinking it, and that's the electrical component. Thoughts create. All thoughts are constructive. So you can begin to, literally, it's like tuning into the timeline that you want to experience. Begin to see, if you're a visual person, and if you're not a visual person, just conceptualize it. Just use your mind to intend what you want to create. And you can be as specific or as general as you want. It's like the steering wheel, that your imagination is a superpower as well. And you can really hone in on that to start accessing these, what people call timelines, these experiences, these things that you want to pull into your physical reality. And then the step three is to feel it, feel it, taste it, smell it. Because when you can perceive that the state that manifestation would put you in, you've pretty much achieved what it's all about. Because the reason you want to manifest anything physically anyways is for the perceived experience, the perceived state it would put you in. And this is what's so important, is you can access that now. The more you practice this, the more you begin to master this, and the more you do it, the better you're going to get at it, just like anything, even if it seems abstract at first. But the more you can really tune into it and align your energy with that thought in the present moment, and just feel it and begin to cultivate gratitude for it as if it already happened now. Because in the present moment, everything you could possibly imagine, everything that's ever happened, ever will happen, ever could happen, ever, anything you can think of is happening now in the present moment. So when you're able to tune into that and feel it now, even if it hasn't happened physically yet, that's when you, like a magnet, you truly bring it towards you. And that's why that's so important, because if you think it, but if you think about, having wealth, having success, but you're always feeling lag, you're going to be suffering. And knowing is half the battle. Just being aware of that is helpful, because then you can begin to cultivate gratitude. And the more you cultivate gratitude, there's always something to be grateful for, the more you will begin to live in abundance. That's another program. We've been so programmed with this idea that wealth is finite, and that, we are not worthy of money, or we could never have it, or it's so hard to have, it's a struggle, when, like, as if that's normal, when it really need not be. The more you practice abundance and feeling gratitude in your every now moment, the more it's amazing. It feels like almost unreal that it can be this easy to just live in abundance. And financial wealth is just one example, but it's true in all regards. And that's again why it's about, the real work of this is the inner. The real work of this is letting go of all of these old programs and traumas that we've been just inundated with. So the fourth step then is, again, just letting go. being able to let go and trust that it's coming and allow. And this is such an important step as well, because again, sometimes this can be the most challenging when we've been so apt to want to control everything and cling on to everything. And that's really a fear program. That's really a lack. That lack is that fear program. So when you're trying to create out of lack, it's kind of a paradox, but the real work there is being able to cultivate these higher vibrational states, which again is, and sometimes you can do this in a day, sometimes it takes a week, depending on where you're at. And there's nothing wrong if you're in a low spot. Just be consistent. If you're consistent with it, with practicing, just starting with gratitude, and do that at least twice a day. When you wake up and before you go to bed, just think about things you're grateful for. And you literally, it's like planting seeds. You're cultivating it. In the first day you might be kind of grateful, and then and as you go on consistently and sincerely, you'll begin to raise that vibrational state naturally. Again, you don't have to overthink it. It's simple. It's meant to be simple. And that's just the beginning. When you can really start to hold that gratitude consistently, things will really just start working out for you all the time. My friend the other day said something funny, something like, life loses sympathy for ingrates. I thought that was funny, but it's true. It's true. It's kind of well stated in a way, So the more you can hold on to these higher vibrations, the more things will easily work out for you. And you create from those higher states, and you act from those higher states. That's when you start tapping into a whole new level of existence. So that's kind of why letting go is so important. The more we cling to things, the more we put things on a pedestal, the more we try to create from our traumas, the more we're kind of just staying in this loop. We're kind of staying in these loops of lack, of duality, of like, I need to fix this problem, when that's not necessarily the case from a higher perspective. You're always going to be expanding, you're always going to be creating. So that's another aspect that I think humans often get stuck on, is just wanting the physical manifestation to happen, or just again, these attachments are literally like anchors. The more you can, and letting go of attachments can be hard sometimes, because we're so rooted in it, and we want things so bad. And that's another thing that sometimes just takes time. That's one of the biggest tips I can give as well, is just to be kind and be gentle with yourself. Remember, because how you feel is everything. So if you're wanting to create abundance, but you're constantly beating yourself up, that's kind of that loop of like, I shouldn't be worrying. What you really want to do is just be able to soothe yourself, almost like a mother would soothe a child. Like, can you just like soothe yourself and let yourself know that, it's okay. Another thing that's really helpful that I want to get into, like all these little tips that I've learned over the years, is the first one, learn to enjoy the process. Again, we get so stuck on wanting to just get to the destination, when really it really is all about the process. And the ego hates to hear about that. The ego just wants what it wants now, because again, the ego is often coming from lack, when really, even when you get to that destination, you're going to want more, and you're going to be creating more. And there's nothing wrong with that. We're, just like source, we're always expanding. But the more you can truly begin to enjoy the process, not only are you going to enjoy the manifestation more, but you're going to have fun the whole time while you're doing it. And that's the thing about when you learn to create from the quantum field like this, instead of just struggle physically, you learn to align your energy like this, you are going to have these inspired impulses to act. And it's, you're not really trying to force it anymore. When you feel like it's right, when you go to act upon creating these things. So another helpful tip is to be a dot. To be like a good visual is like being a blank page. That's a helpful way to stay present. Because again, it's often when we get attached to the past. We get attached to this like linearity. You know, the linear time is actually a big aspect of a lot of our attachments, I think. Like these narratives and these storylines we have, whether they're conscious or unconscious, about ourselves that we are identifying with, can be, you know, something that perpetuates and broadcasts the kind of the very things that we're, you know, trying to in a way get out of, you know. So if you're like I kind of said before, identifying with these past versions of yourself that, you know, are, I don't know, poor, or, you know, or unhealthy, or this or that, you know, it's like that personal identity is something to be aware of, because we are literally shifting so fast now. You know, you're not who you were a few months ago. You're not who you were yesterday. And even every moment you have an opportunity to be a whole new open being. And so I really like that analogy ever since I thought of it, or I heard it, being a blank page or being a dot. It's been very, very helpful to not attach to these narratives, because it's really these storylines, these continuities that keep us often anchored in old energies. So another helpful thing, and this is a really good one to start to get out of duality, is, and this is something we're all going through right now, is the contrast, is getting triggered, you know, whatever it may be, if it's something you see, or something someone says, you know, or something you hear on TV, you know, anything external, you know, because everything in the external is always trying to kind of get your attention or like suck you in. And oftentimes when we get triggered, it's like an initial knee-jerk reaction to just, you know, want to react or to project it onto the external world. When something amazing that I've come to find, and it took me a while to truly integrate it, and I'm still integrating this because, you know, we're all still being challenged, is triggers are literally just opportunities for growth every single time. You know, that contrast is arising to teach you something. And the physical world, and this can be hard for the ego as well, but I found it again and again and again, is that the physical world is a disguise. You know, it's always reflecting back at you some kind of aspect of yourself. And again, it's not something you need to beat yourself up about. That's not the point. You know, taking responsibility for that isn't about beating yourself up, because then you're still in that duality. It's just about observing and being able to alchemize that. Again, like I said earlier, just being able to feel that and let that go and choose otherwise. And that's when you really realize how much power you have. And that's when you can really come out of this duality in this experience, because the bad things no longer are so bad. You know, even the uncomfortable things, they're just other experiences. So in a way, the uncomfortable becomes comfortable, because it's, again, even creating all of these things in your heart, it, you know, it's all about the real inner work and the evolution. You know, I believe that's one of the reasons these desires come up in the first place, is so we can begin to go on these journeys with ourselves. Again, it really is all about the process. So when those triggers, you know, and another amazing thing about triggers is they're opportunities to let go of trauma, because obviously if something's bothering you in the external world, it's, you know, a way of your body letting you know there's still that trauma there that it needs to be dealt with. And it's good that it comes to the surface, because you don't want it hiding in you. You know, we've been so unconscious. That's just how we've been subverted. Humanity's been subverted into such unconsciousness about our beliefs and about our feelings, and especially as children. So the more when you get triggered, you know, that's like a trauma that can come out of you, because when you feel it, you can release it. It's not stuck in your system anymore. You can actually have the opportunity to just release it and then choose otherwise. So that's really helpful. Triggers really can be amazing opportunities to shift consciousness once you start viewing them as that. You know, it doesn't mean you're off your path. It doesn't mean that there's something wrong. It doesn't mean you're not worthy. It's just an opportunity to shift your consciousness. And again, it's not for the faint-hearted. I mean, that's something you really got to be brave and bold to do this kind of inner work. but it's so worth it every single time. You really start to become so sovereign and so empowered when you do this. So, I think it's so worth it just to go through that fire. So another helpful thing that's been really good for me is to have some kind of metaphorical toolkit. And this is true for creation, but this applies to everything. This applies just to navigating everyday life, is to have, on hand in your mind some things that help you to bring you back into your center for when you do get triggered. Because there's nothing wrong with getting sucked into a trigger and looping for a long time, but once you know that and you're aware, then you can really save yourself a lot of time and energy. And again, this is part of the practice and the mastery. So for me, some things that I would keep is coming back to the present moment, breathing, reminding myself that everything's always ultimately working for my highest good. Maybe certain mantras, certain ideas. We all know what brings us back. We all know what gives us this sense of purpose again, and reminder of why we're really here. It really helps to be the observer, not just be your thoughts, but to be the observer of your thoughts and feelings, because that's when you have a lot more sovereignty, have a lot more power. We're multidimensional. We're really coming into this multidimensionality where, we have this human experience, and we can honor that human experience. The human feels all these things. The human's been through so much on this planet. It's insane. If you really ever go into any of the rabbit holes of what has gone on in our history, it's no joke what the human has been through. So it's so helpful to have extreme compassion for yourself while you're healing these things and reprogramming these things out of this victim mentality and into being empowered, because that really is the best thing we can do for ourselves, and of course do for everyone. The more we can really master ourselves and these kinds of ideas and these kinds of practices, not only are we going to be thriving, which we all are worthy of and we all deserve, and I believe that is our original state. That's really our natural state, not in this inverted mind control, lack, perversion, distortion. It's like naturally human beings are, we're programmed to be sovereign creators. So again, going back to what I was saying, though, it's very helpful then to be in your higher awareness then and be observing from that higher state. It puts so much more power back into your being, and let yourself feel those things. In this 3D realm, you feel that duality, and there's nothing wrong with that. But from a higher perspective, you can kind of observe and have that power. So another thing, of course, I've already said this, the present moment, it's just worth a reminder, again and again, because it's so easy to get sucked into the past or get sucked into the future. And really, when you let go of this linear time, in the third dimension, we exist where there's linear time. It's like you get from point A to point B. I think that time is actually speeding up, but that's kind of a topic for another day. But from a higher perspective, again, multidimensional beings, the past, present, and future are all happening now. And it might sound crazy, but the more you meditate on this and you actually experiment with this, the more you will find that this is true. Even if it's not happening physically, you are still able to, go into your past memories or go into these future timelines or even other realities, other dimensions. And you can experience these things and extract information from these things that you can go to apply to your physical reality. But the physical reality is really just a hologram. It's really just a reflection of your consciousness. And, we're all co-creating together. But in your reality, you are the focal point. We're all going to experience even this plane of existence. We're all connected, but we're all going to experience this differently. And we all have a choice in how we experience that, And again, everything is a fractal, and humanity is one. So everything that applies to you and your individual awakening often applies to, the human awakening that we're seeing right now. And there's so many parallels to draw upon that. But again, that's kind of another topic. And so it really comes down to, again, having responsibility, having responsibility for yourself. And again, this isn't for the faint-hearted. This takes a lot of courage to do again and again and again, because when you're working with some of these darker energies, and sometimes it's yours, sometimes it's actually in the collective. We've been taught that thoughts and emotions are like these things that are just contained inside of you, when really it's more like just waves of energy that is often shared. Not all your thoughts are your own, not all your emotions are your own. That's why, again, boundaries are so important. But again, the taking responsibility just is about recognizing that it's about taking your power back. It's not about beating yourself up. It's not about, oh man, why am I creating this? Because that's kind of that ego. And I found that it's important to have compassion for the ego. I think the ego is trying to just keep you safe, but it's a very adolescent consciousness. It's a very childish consciousness. It's not meant to be creating your destiny for you. So when that ego steps in, because the ego always wants to submit to fear, and when you're in fear, it seems very real. And fear is a consciousness too. Fear is a consciousness that is always sucking humans in. I think fear is one of the most potent energies we're actually dealing with here. So be very aware of that, when you're thinking in terms of those fearful thoughts. And again, there's nothing wrong with it. You don't have to beat yourself up, because then you might start looping, the fear of the fear. Don't be afraid of fear. It's just a consciousness. It's just an energy. You don't have to give it so much power when you observe it from a higher perspective, and you realize it's just fear. Fear is always trying to suck you in and convince you that, you're a victim, that you're disempowered, that you can't do this, that you're not worthy, that, it'll never work. It's never worked before. Those are those voices, those thought forms. That's exactly what we are transmuting right now. And that's another reason I'm so passionate about this, because it's not, at the end of the day, again, it's not even necessarily about the physical manifestations of your reality. I mean, that's an aspect of it. And, that's a very fun part of the human experience, 100%, But really, this whole thing is about transformation. This is an active way of going into the self and learning how to do this kind of inner alchemy. Because when you start to create something, you're constantly, again, going to be faced with this contrast and with these triggers. And again, there's nothing wrong with that. It's just those are always the opportunities to keep getting better and better and better. So it's so empowering when you see that. It's really coming out of duality to see that if you believe it, if you can perceive it this way, things literally are always working out for you. They are always ultimately serving you. I know there's some really challenging dark night of the soul times as well, but at least for me, when I look back on those times, even, at the time I didn't understand them, but even looking back, I see that those times served me so well and literally catalyzed my growth, and probably saved me 10 years worth of time in 1 year of just extreme dark night of the soul. Those moments really do teach us so much. So, but I think we're coming into a time where the collective consciousness is raising more to where we don't have to linger in these dark states as much anymore. But everyone's experience is different. So, wherever you're at, there's nothing wrong with that. And speaking of that, this is another important tip, is claiming your sovereignty, being sovereign. And again, this applies to creation, but it applies to everything. We are sovereign beings. And this has been one of the biggest themes in this awakening process. Again, for us as individuals and for us collectively, we've been so programmed to give our sovereignty away, and to give our sovereignty away to these external authorities. And a lot of that is through manipulation. And it's funny because that's how, that's how these external authorities and people are, but that's literally how these thought forms are too. They really, it's not always so black and white. A lot of times you get, humans get tricked out of their sovereignty through manipulation. So I guess the easiest way to say yes is to not say no. So that's a helpful tip whenever you're dealing, whether it's physically, because again, everything starts energetically when you're sovereign. So even if you're dealing with like entities or energies that you don't consent to, and you just have to make it clear. And you might be amazed at your power, because I know I have been. Something that maybe has been with you for a long time, when you finally say like, I demand and command you to leave. Like, I do not consent to you be here. Like, no, we really do have that power. A lot of us don't realize it, and we just don't exercise it. So I really invite you to as well. I mean, it's kind of on topic, kind of off topic, but if something is really bothering you, come from a higher perspective. That's why this is so important, is because, a lot of my work has been about healing and about, in a way, soothing people. And it's not to make people passive. It's really to help people to act from higher states of consciousness where they're so much more potent. Because when you're acting out of fear and out of lack, kind of like I talked about earlier, you're way more susceptible. You're kind of giving your power away on an energetic level, because you're believing in that threat. And I know that kind of gets tricky, but at the end of the day, even if you have fear, if you just begin to claim your sovereignty, I am sovereign. I do this every day. There's a time when I would do this multiple times, as much as I needed to every single day, until I really embodied that. And it's so worth it to do, because we really do have that power. We are free will beings. So again, kind of a tangent, but also really relevant and really helpful in these times, because there's so many things, so many people, so many beings, so many just thought forms and energies that really will try to manipulate you in very tricky and subtle ways into playing into them. And, don't sign that red dotted line. Even thoughts, many of us are empaths. So we found that we've had to really learn how to set boundaries for ourselves with people. And it's the same way with these thoughts. Are you people pleasing these thoughts, these thought forms? Like, oh yeah, I'm not good enough. Oh yeah, I don't want to upset these people's egos by speaking my truth, or anything of that nature. It's kind of another fractal of trying to people please these disempowering thoughts, when you don't have to. You don't have to. You actually have a choice. Once you know you have a choice, it's a huge game changer. So something I really invite people to experiment with, because you might be surprised when you really assert yourself, from a place of power in your heart, not from a place of even fear or anger or lack, but when you can come back to your presence and just know yourself and know that you have free will to do these types of things. So all of that being said, I also want to share some techniques that are also very helpful before I start answering questions. So of course, the first one is meditation. Meditation is so helpful for so many things, creation, for healing, and just being able to come back into your body and get to know yourself better, and just be present. Again, that's kind of the tricky thing about creating your reality, is it's about having fun and being creative. It's not so much about trying to control and cling everything, because again, we're kind of coming out of that ego paradigm of wanting to control. That's kind of, the ego is again that third dimension aspect of the self that is always in fear. When you start to step into the higher self more and let go, you find that the higher self has got your back. You might not always know how, you might not know when, and that's the tricky part, that us humans, we really just, have a hard time with, is being able to just let go and have trust for these things, especially when we have all these traumatizing experiences in the past. So meditation is so helpful. And then another helpful thing, of course, is if you're not already, getting in tune with your own inner guidance, and we all view this differently, whether it's your higher self, your spirit guides, angels, self, God, universe, just these are just words. Really getting in touch with that, because you literally have all the cheat codes and hacks you could possibly want when you really start honing in on that. And we all have this ability. And if you haven't started yet, then my suggestion would be writing. That's a really helpful way to start channeling that information, because it's innate. It's innately within us. We all have this ability to channel these higher guidance. And it's so helpful for no matter what you're doing, you just get direct advice, and you find that you don't need to go outside of yourself for the answers. It's all truly within you. And another one would be visualization. Like I said before, when you're creating, really be able to visualize what you want to see. And again, this is true individually and collectively. I think we're mastering this individually, but I truly feel that part of our evolution as the collective is going to be the pioneers who have been practicing and mastering these things, to begin to use these tools for humanity, to help humanity to manifest higher timelines, to help humanity to stop the mind control. Is such a pain, because not only is it creating suffering through like the experience, but it's creating these manifestations, because people, it's like that predictive programming. People get programmed with this stuff, and then they go on to actually create it, and it's not even our own intention. It's not even really our own doings. So again, like I said, another helpful technique is just beginning to cultivate gratitude, again and again and again. That's the best place to start, especially if you do feel like you're in, a weird place. Once you start cultivating gratitude, you will naturally raise your vibration. Like I said before, this is really all about your evolution, and the more you continue to practice these kinds of things, the more you will begin to know yourself and really connect with who we really are. We are so much more powerful than we know, than we've been taught. We really have amazing origins and amazing purposes of why we're here, and these are not things that, they really tell you in school, but there's a reason for that. So it's such an amazing time to be here. It really is. And even as things start to get crazier and crazier in the matrix, or in the loop, or in this external reality, I think that, we are prepared for it when we understand how powerful we are, and that so much of that external stuff is an illusion, and it's an attempt to get you to go. It's an attempt to convince you that it's in control of you, and it can be so cunning. And that's again why it's so helpful to understand this information and begin practicing it, and knowing that you create from the inside out. You no longer have to be a victim of your environment, and you can do miraculous things with this. It's truly incredible. You can do the things that many think would be impossible. And again, that's where our real work is. Then it's not about struggling in the physical world. It's about really mastering and understanding these energetics of truly being sovereign. Very few humans have been able to really understand this up until now. So it's amazing to see such a mass awakening happening, even if it is just the beginning. We are the pioneers, and I feel a lot of love and a lot of purpose in that. One of the last things I'll say in ending this, because I know this is kind of a lot, is just lost my train of thought. I guess that happens. I really built that up just to kind of let that go. But this is, you know, it is such an amazing time. And oh, that's what it was. It always comes back, is we are here to do things that have never been done before. So, you know, don't compare yourself to people. You know, we all have our own unique journey and how we do this, you know. So again, we're doing things that's never been done before, you know. So even yourself, past versions of yourself, you know, don't hold yourself to those past anchored standards. We're constantly creating and constantly learning to let go and to step into the unknown. You know, every present moment is this unknown chance to access these new abilities and these new states of awareness, and it's never ending. So it's such a beautiful process. And thank you all so much for being here, for listening to this. I know this is really long. I kind of just got lost in it and time gets away from me, but thank you for sticking with me. And thank you so much, Alexandra, for asking me to be here. It's been so awesome. I love your channel, and this is just great.
Thank you so much. I really, really appreciate you. Do you know what I love about you? Especially, like, I don't know if anyone here has ever watched your videos, because I know that Regan has her own YouTube channel. Your mind is so deep, and I guess I would only know this because I've watched your videos, but like your mind is like an ocean. And sometimes I watch you and I think, how do you like just sit there and think of this on your own? Like for me, I kind of feel like I need someone to like a sounding board, I guess, kind of inspire a conversation and stuff like that. And what I feel with you is that you have this real easy ability, like this real ease of seeing things from a higher perspective, whereas a lot of people are still kind of learning that technique. But you have this like real ease with it. Like I can just feel that from you.
Thank you. Thank you.
So I did write down like a lot of questions. So I think I'll like probably start them. I'm just kind of wondering which ones to start with. So I first of all would like you to kind of describe and maybe explain what a fractal is for maybe some people that aren't really aware of what that is or what that means or how that relates to us being a human.
Yeah, so okay, that's like a big question. I mean, fractal, so it's kind of like the idea of like the holographic universe where the whole is in every piece. So there's these constant parallels that you find, you know, like a physical example of a fractal would be like tree branches, the way they all, you know, fractal out and they all kind of have like the same patterns. And you can find that pattern all over the place, you know, even in like our lungs and our bronchial tubes, the way they branch out looks just like the plants or I don't know, sacred geometry. It's very simple. It's kind of hard to put into words though, because it's just these patterns that come up again and again and again, and things that you wouldn't even think are related, but everything is related, and it just shows how everything is interconnected. And you know, from a third dimensional level, it's like it seems like everything is separate, and it's like there's no way these things could be connected. But then from a higher perspective, you're like, wow, there's literally no coincidences. Like every single tiny little thing that happens is related to something.
I kind of feel like relating ascension to fractals, like in my head, like the way I see it is going back up the fractal, back to the source of the fractal. Would that
Yeah,
make sense? Or is
yeah,
that's kind of just how I see it.
yeah. And I often like kind of hear that how it's explained to me in my own head from like my higher self is like we are source remembering who it is, like we remember who we are again. It's like the dreamer and the dream. So as we awaken, it's, you know, it's exciting, and it's like we're in this duality, but it ultimately, you know, I don't know about linear time, but it is inevitable that, you know, we return to wholeness, like out of the illusion of separation. We were never really separate.
Yeah, I love that. One of the questions I wanted to ask as well was about impatience, because I am very, very impatient. So when you started describing about try to be patient with the journey and enjoy the process, how would you advise someone or like maybe there's other people that have this issue, because I know like Chloe, who had to drop off, she had this same question. How do you advise people to deal with impatience? Like how can we bring it back to patience?
So that's a really good question. And I think that's totally normal because, I feel that too. I've battled with that heavily. And ultimately, a lot of times impatience stems back into a lack of faith, you know, and either way, it's helpful to go into, you know, everyone's different, every case is different, but it's kind of like almost a lack of believing because it's like you just want it now. It's like that that those attachments. So as far as really being able to let go of that impatience, I guess, is to kind of lose yourself in the process. And I know for myself too, and I recently went through an experience like this where I was so focused on the desire. And I think sometimes we think that if we just like put all this energy into the desire, then that'll like make it happen. When really there's often enough momentum for the desire. It's really just, again, it's about, I think that's another thing I was thinking of recently too, where even in this society, from my understanding, there's been so much taken away of like the feminine. And it's been kind of, you need that balance of divine masculine and feminine. It's literally the perfect balance. That's like the Hermetic principles. So I think we're kind of used to this kind of overly masculine, active, like, I need to do this, I need to do this, I need to do this, rather than kind of just the more receptive, like allowing. And it's really just a practice, it can be kind of insufferable at times, but I think meditation helps, and just breathing and like realizing it and letting it go, or even visuals of kind of like cutting cords, because the more you literally just let it go, like just like, you know what I mean? Not that you stop caring about it, but you let it go on like an ego attachment level, literally the more easier it can come. And again, sometimes you just have to work through that, and it can take a lot because we've just been so inundated with this programming of like, not even just us as individuals, but even the collective of just like, just wanting to cling on to things. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. I guess in my head, like the way I try and deal with impatience is by trying to remind myself as much as I can, just remind myself, enjoy the process. It's not about the destination, like enjoy the process. Because I guess that is where the learning and the fun and the challenge and the growth is really. Of course, it would be nice to enjoy the destination.
I think another thing too about that is like, you just reminded me of too, is like when you really start to contemplate on how linear time is, it's like I truly believe that we're higher, like naturally reincarnated into these denser bodies. So it's like we're not really in a way used to that linear time where things like have such a lag. It's like we're used to things just like manifesting like instantly, like our higher selves are. So it's just when you come into like the third dimension, it's like slowing down like a song on a record player, and everything just gets real slow. And it's just, it is frustrating, but I guess that is even a part of it, is just dealing with that those emotional anchors.
Yeah. And when we think about, sorry.
Well, I just wanted to ask a question about that question.
Mm-hmm.
I think so often, like, people just look at manifestation like an event, like me included. I think of it like, hey, I need something to happen. Let me sit down and make that happen. And I know logically it's supposed to be more of a flow, like this is life, and things are just naturally happening because I live this way. Is there any suggestions you have for me or anyone else that might be going through that to like improve the way we process life to make it more of a flow and less of an event?
Yeah, that's a really good observation. I think coming into the present moment, and I know that sounds kind of cliche, but I find them again and again, I'm always surprised, especially with the way that everything is shifting so fast now. When I come into the present moment, how I'm able to access so many new non-physical things I haven't been able to access yet. So I think in like whatever you're trying to manifest, I don't know, an example, maybe like money, or health, that might be a better example. You know, you want this like perfect health and this vitality, this dream body, and it's like we can get so fixated on that physical happening when really, again, it's more about the state that it would put us in. So it's like I guess like something you could do is go into like why do you want that, like, you know, like why do you really want that? Is it the feeling of security? Like go to the highest vibration, you know, don't worry about the physical manifestation, but like go into like the highest vibration of like, would it bring you freedom? Would it bring you confidence? Would it bring you security? Like what would the feeling be? That, because that's really, you know, what, you know, we don't just want money because of the physical paper. We want that feeling of security, that feeling of abundance, that feeling of freedom that it would bring. So sometimes I find that helpful is to, and again, and it's just, you know, this is the real work. And something that really resonates with me that's been helpful is when you're suffering, you know, you're off mission. When you're challenged, you know, you're on mission. So if you're really kind of like wallowing in it, then it might be something to take up with your ego. But if it's just challenging and you're really, you know, then that's just part of it. You know, it's just part of the real work we're doing.
Okay. And like to follow up on that question, is there any advice you have for someone like me, if or to be like more present more frequently? Because I can make myself present consciously. Like if I sit down and say I want to be present, I can say this is my in breath, this is my out breath, and be present in that exact moment. But how can I be more present like throughout my day? How can I incorporate that into my life? Do you have any tips in that area?
Yeah, and honestly, this is probably one of the most powerful things you can do, because it's one thing to, you know, it's amazing to meditate and go into these states, but I truly believe that's what we're really being asked to do now, is to be able to occupy these elevated states in the flow in the present moment as we go about our day. And, you know, depending on how your day is, again, it can be challenging, but I think just it's just something that, like with the mind, you have to do through repetition. Programming is just to remind yourself. Again, it's very simple, just reminding yourself to be present. So that could look like, you know, doing the dishes and just like breathing, and just like you always have the choice to go into your higher awareness. And it's almost like, you know, a visual, if you're a visual person, it's like imagine kind of like looking down at yourself, you know, from a higher, literally from a higher perspective, and just kind of, you know, in a way like tuning in with that higher awareness. It's really, really simple. It's like our mind always wants to complicate these things, but you know, you don't have to, you know, for example, like now moment, like sometimes now moment has like this feeling of separation to, even to me, whereas presence, it just is, you know, like right now, it just is, it just, you know, there's no forcing it. It's just like, all you can really do is become aware of it. And, you know, maybe you could do something to remind yourself like more often. And as you do this, it'll become natural to just kind of like tune in from a higher perspective, like in each moment, or like ask yourself, like, you know, how am I feeling? Like, how am I thinking? Like, how did that make me feel? Like, what just happened? You know, these are just kind of some of my processes that I've been doing, that hopefully that's helpful.
Absolutely, that was helpful. I appreciate your time. You can pick up, Alex.
Thanks,
Thank
Eve.
you.
One of my goals is sorry, I lost my train of thought because there's noise going in the background. One of my goals is to really come more into my authentic self, right? Because I've become, especially like over this past year and end of last year, I've become so aware of my, like all the layers of ego, programming, conditioning, unconscious behavior. I'm like so aware of it, but like not at the stage where I'm able to kind of like resolve all of them all at once, because I can see all the layers, like there's so much of it. So I have this real like rush and impatience to be like, I want to feel my authentic self. What does my authentic energy feel like? Do you feel to create the life that we want to live, or like to manifest the goals that we have, do you feel like it's really vital and important to come into our authentic self to really achieve that reality that we want to be living?
Oh yeah, that's sort of the perfect question, because that's, something that really came to me even before I did this presentation, that almost changed like the whole structure of how I wanted to deliver this, because it's like, I think oftentimes, that can be a way that, I don't want to say we continue to loop, but if we um, create from like these traumas, it's a little different than if we just are allowed just be our authentic self. And you might still be creating the same thing, but it's coming from a different place. So I would say that, that's very important. And that's a theme in general right now, is like literally being a sovereign human, being who you authentically are without a filter, is one of the best things you can do for all of humanity right now, because it's such a brave thing, and people are so living in fear and so afraid to be themselves, and so like this conformity. And so, and even for myself, it's like, it's something that you might have known, and like I feel like I've known that for years, like, yeah, of course, like I need to be my authentic self, but actually embodying it and integrating it, and again, in every present moment, when it's like integrating it, when you start to integrate this, is when it really begins to change your life. So yeah, I think that that is such a theme right now for many of us, and we're discovering deeper layers of ourselves, and we're all a bunch of weirdos, like we're all unique, like we're all again here to do things that no one's ever done before. And I know for me, when I see people, whether it's someone like singing a song or delivering a message or just doing something like, and they're just totally being so unique, and they're just owning it, and they're just rocking it, and it's something I've never seen anyone attempt to do before, I'm just like, wow, that is amazing, that is so inspiring.
I love celebrating authenticity. Like I'm all about that as well. The other thing that I wanted to talk about was the ego, because obviously it's like a real running theme, especially like within our kind of like community. But it's like, how can we work with the ego? It seems to be like such a tricky thing to work with. How can we work with it in such a positive way?
Yeah, and this is something, I'm learning as well, because I think this is a huge part of our current stage of evolution, is you know becoming aware of the ego, and the subtle layers of the ego, which actually can be more tricky. It's like you can get rid of these like really obvious surface layer ego things, and that's already challenging sometimes, but then you start, like, that ego can be so cunning. And so I guess one way that has helped me a lot is like I heard this great analogy that like you wouldn't let a 5-year-old drive your car, and it's kind of like you wouldn't let the ego control your life. So seeing the ego more as like a like immature child, rather than like some evil like satanic like enemy, for me is really helpful, because it kind of pulls out that duality aspect and that division. And I can just, because I think when you have that drama, like we create so much drama, but when we like kind of let go of that, and can just see the ego for like what it is, we can kind of realize like we're no longer afraid of it, we're no longer angry at it, we're no longer scared of it or sad about it. It's just like, just let it go, like just let it step down. And it's hard because it really, it's so we're so programmed with that, like that's how we've been operating, when literally we're going into a time when it doesn't even work anymore. Like things we used to do that used to work no longer work in like this new energy. So it's like we're really being asked to surrender, and let go a lot of control. And again, I find again and again, every time I let go of that control, it's like I'm just amazed at like the blessings that come into my life.
Yeah, and the other thing that seems to be like a common thing, especially within the spiritual community, is pointing out other people's ego. That person's an ego, or that person's acting from ego. Like, and I'm guilty of that as well. Like, I'm guilty at pointing the finger. But I think it's like really important to kind of, it's something that it's just like come to my head. Like, it's really important to show compassion for that person's process and the stage that they're at. Okay, maybe I observe that that is where they're at, but that's not me. That's not for me to judge. And I should just show compassion and observe it and just be like, you know, that is where they're at. That's their lesson. That's their challenge. That's their path to be in at the moment, you know. And I think this kind of thing with ego should be talked about so much more, like especially within this community, to just raise awareness. Because like you say, it is seen as such a negative thing, you know. Even I'm still trying to change my perception around ego and become more aware of it from a loving perspective. And actually, like, there's a purpose to ego. Ego is the thing that like allows us to have this human experience, this individual experience. Otherwise we would all be unity. We would all have this unity consciousness, wouldn't we? Yeah, I realized that wasn't a question. That was just more like on the
really good though, really good though.
I don't know if anyone else has any questions. You can feel free to jump in and jump off mute and ask Regan directly. I have a few more though, if not. Yeah, you know what I wanted to touch on was like jumping timelines. How do we know if we've jumped timelines? Is it something that we become very aware of, or is it just something that we gradually notice, like, oh, that's kind of changed, or I feel different about this? Or is it like more gradual and subtle changes of physical surrounding or internal feeling?
That's a really good question too. I feel like this is something that even recently I get the feeling that like we as in, I guess, like the pioneers of consciousness are at this phase where we're going to become a lot more conscious of what we've actually been doing. So I think there's been a lot of times when we've been jumping timelines, and that's also something that, you know, can mean different things to different people. But in the respect of you know, just I guess like shifting realities, I think it's been kind of subtle. You know, it can be an internal and external experience. It's usually started by the internal shift. From what I've experienced, there's so many shifts now, you know, even in just comparison to a few years ago, happening with the natural energies of Earth and with humanity, that, you know, it's not uncommon to feel like there's been like total jumps just in how you, because like it's so slow, like it's so subtle, and it kind of needs to be, you know, because like sometimes I feel, for example, like my natural state of consciousness is like how I felt, you know, years ago when I was like eating like magic mushrooms, and it's like, this is my everyday consciousness though, and I'm functioning very high level at it. So I'm like, but if that would have just happened like immediately, then like I probably would have been freaking out. I'd be like, I don't know how to drive. You know, I don't know if that, I just had that thought recently. But so I think we're going to become a lot more conscious of it. Another aspect of that too is, I think with anything spiritual, we have this tendency to like second guess ourselves and like overanalyze everything from like a more like logical perspective, a more like third dimensional perspective. So like I think we know like wow, I feel like I just shifted a timeline. But we often, you know, again, and it's that ego as well that comes in. It's like, no, you didn't. Like, that's impossible. Like, that's not, you know, that doesn't happen. Like, you're stuck here. Like, I don't know. Just some of the narratives that we often hear when we try to, like, you know, people call it analyzation, paralyzation.
Yeah, I'm with you. One of the things there's like, I don't mean to jump onto the next question so quickly, but I just, before I forget, like one of the things that I really struggle with is, you know, obviously with our internal state is a reflection of our physical surrounding, I guess. One of the things I really struggle with is matching up what internal issue or what internal state is happening that is reflecting in my physical reality. How is that something, like, how can I improve, like matching up? Like, do you know what I'm trying to say? Like, oh, I have this issue internally, and oh, and I noticed that's why that happened like the other day in my physical reality. Like, oh, that's why that happened because I'm feeling like this. Like, I just have this real difficulty matching up the correlations. Like, do you have any advice on how I can improve that?
What comes to my mind is being able to, like at the next opportunity when that happens, and especially I feel like some of the most potent times are often like right in the morning or before bed, before we start getting into like beta wave, like, um, you know, consciousness, and just kind of, being able to relax into yourself, into your feeling, and think about that event and like, what does it make you feel? Like, does it make you feel guilty? Does it make you feel unworthy? Does it make you feel like angry? And just kind of go into like as deep into the core of the feeling, just feeling it, without really making judgments about it. And then kind of taking that information. And then once you get that information, then you can kind of like dissect it and like more critically. And if you keep doing that, you'll definitely keep getting deeper. Because a lot of times it tends to be, a pattern that we all have, like certain patterns that we usually, core wounds, you could say, of like, shame or like guilt or like anger or insecurity or things of that nature. And that's really amazing to do. Does that help?
Yeah, that really helps. I'm going to really practice like feeling into things more.
Mm-hmm.
And also using my intuition, it's really been strengthening and enhancing over the past couple of years. So that's something like I'm trying to practice with, is my intuition as well.
Mm-hmm.
Like, because like during dream states, I guess, like first thing in the morning, I get like a very clear messages in the morning, like very early in the morning. So that makes a lot of sense. So I guess like I'll pay more attention to that as well. And I have very, very vivid dreams, which often don't feel like dreams. They actually feel like more astral traveling, or like visions of different timelines and different lives. So yeah, so it's really interesting how that kind of like all correlates as well. Another goal that I have is attaining freedom. Like we all we all want to have, but then I have to keep reminding myself that freedom is a state of mind. So when I keep saying like, there's feelings I feel like I feel trapped, like I can hear myself saying I feel trapped. But what am I feeling trapped from? Because really freedom is a state of mind. Like how can I come back to like, I guess the question that I'm trying to ask is, how can we really fully embody being this sovereign being?
Yeah, that's an amazing question too. And I think this is also an ongoing process. Something that came up for me too, like when you're saying that, is like I think it's, also possible that that's I've been feeling more and more like we're really tuning into like this like collective shadow. So it's like you might be also just picking up on like the general feeling of like people around you, in where you live. It's just like, even if it's unconscious or subliminal, just like really picking. I mean, I just feel a lot of that, I feel a lot of that in humanity. And so it's like something that is so important. And I've known this for a long time, but again, it's something that's been like shown to me more and more and more. It's like we can't underestimate how powerful our observation is alone. And again, like the ego is so physical, it thinks things have to be done physically, and eventually they will be done physically, and there's nothing wrong with that. But everything again comes back to the energetics. And so even just your observation, to be able to observe that, and I guess kind of like I was talking about before, being able to not resist that and just feel that emotion without also without like getting any storylines attached of like why I feel this way, or it's this person's fault, or like these kinds of thought forms. I mean, they'll happen, it's kind of impossible to actually silence the mind, but just kind of like let them go, don't get attached to them. But really it's the emotion. So if you can feel that emotion and just kind of let it like breathe in and breathe out and move out of you, not only will you feel that energy literally leave your body, but you'll often get all kinds of downloads afterwards of like teachings and things that will be like really beneficial to you about that. But again, that's like literally some of the work we're doing here, I believe. Like people, I think that people come here to Earth for different reasons, but people like us is like, I truly believe we came here to shift the human collective. So it's not always fun to like do this alchemy of like these dense raw emotions of this slavery. We're literally shifting.
I love that. Thank you so much, because you just reminded me that when I'm in that state, I'm going to do breath work. Like I'm not
Yes.
doing breath work enough, like, and that's something that I'm really trying to implement as one of my spiritual tools. So thank you. Yeah, that was a good reminder.
Me too. I'm just getting into breath work too. I'm like, wow, I should have done this years ago. This is
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah, completely. Does anyone else have any more questions for Regan? Feel free to come off mute if you do. If not, Regan, would you like to tell people how they can connect with you and what services you provide?
Yeah. So I do Reiki healing long distance, and I also do what I call a HSP coaching, which is just higher sense perception coaching, helping. Again, these are innate abilities that everyone has, but sometimes it's helpful to have someone there with you as a teacher. So if you're interested in inquiring, or you have any questions, or you want to contact me for anything, and I also have plenty of other videos talking about these kinds of things, and articles, and even music on my website, transformingthedarkness.com. And if you go there, you can find all the information about my work and my services.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I appreciate your time, Regan. I appreciate your wisdom, and I appreciate you sharing your knowledge as well. And obviously like feeling into that intuitive kind of information coming through. So I really am grateful for you. Thank you so much. And thank you for everyone joining as well.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Everyone take care, and I look forward to seeing you on the next week's Thriving Thursday workshop. Thank you. Take care.
Bye. Thank you.